Welcome to Muppet Courtyard, I guess. Hello and welcome back to my channel. This week I'm going to do something a little different, and that is I am going to recreate my favourite dress from when I was in high school. And when I tell you this was my favourite dress, I mean this was my favourite dress. There are so many pictures of me wearing this throughout the 2000s. It was my go-to piece of clothing. I found it in an op shop and decided that yes, this would become my second skin and I would live in it. The last place I wore it to was Disney World in 2013, and I remember when I put it on then, it was starting to look real jank. It had some holes in it, it was falling apart, and it had some dry rot in one of the seams. That was the last time it ever got worn, and ever since then I've been really sad that my staple dress no longer existed. So this is a project I have been meaning to do for the longest time now, because 2013 was 10 years ago, oh my gosh. But the reason I hadn't is because I hadn't been able to find the right pattern. Which brings me around to starting the dress. The pattern that I'd been searching for a very long time happened to be one that was off the shoulder, low-waisted, bubble skirt dress. Now I didn't think I was going to find something exactly like that, so I just looked for two patterns that had the elements I wanted and then I could combine them. The first of which being this butterick pattern from the 80s. Now as you can see, this one has the off-the-shoulder, low-waisted tube top thing that I was going for. And then the simplicity pattern, also from the 80s, and this one has the bubble skirt that I'm after, so that's the patterns onto fabric. So for the main fabric of the dress, I remember the original one was a cotton one that had the dots printed onto it. I couldn't find anything like that, but I did find this rayon, and it has the dots woven into it, so that's really cool. For the lining, I have a 100% black cotton, simple. And for the corset panel at the back of the dress and the lining of the bubble skirt, I have a black satin because that is what I had on the original one. Alright, let's start this thing. I also have some wide satin ribbon and an invisible zip. As usual, the first part of any project is to cut out all the pattern pieces. I started first with the rayon pieces and then moved on to the lining fabric. Once all the pieces were cut out, I then transferred any of the notches and markings. I did this using a tailor's chalk. The first part in assembling the bodice is sewing in the darts. So what I did here that I don't usually do is I actually did some tailor's tacks to help keep the darts in place as I sew them on the machine. First I sewed the darts in the lining fabric, and then the outer fabric, and then I repeated with the front pieces as well. With the darts sewn, I then checked the fit on my mannequin just by pinning it in place, and it's looking good. On to interfacing. So here I have some black iron-on interfacing, and the top of the bodice calls for these two strips just to help stabilise the fabric. With the interfacing applied, it's now time to sew the front and back pieces together. I forgot to mention earlier in the video that one of my favourite details of this dress was the corset backing in it. It was a fake corset back, but it just looked really cool and I felt like so fancy in it. From what I remember, there was a panel of satin in the back, and then it had a really thick wide satin ribbon that crisscrossed along the back and tied up just at the tailbone. So here's how I'm going to attempt to recreate that. To do this, I got the back part of the bodice that I'd already made and traced the shape of the corset into the satin fabric. I then used some really thin ribbon and made some lacing on the back of this panel. Then I folded the seam allowance under on either side and just pinned it to the centre back of the back panel. And then I top stitched it in place. With the faux corset panel added to the back, I could now sew the lining fabric to the outer fabric. So I first sewed it along the top edge, and I also understitched the lining as well. I was so impatient to see how the corset back was going to look, so I actually laced it up here, but I wouldn't recommend doing this because you might catch the tails when you go to sew the skirt on, which is where we are now. Out of the satin fabric, I cut one of the skirt lining panels from the butterick pattern because that was the right length I needed. Then to make the bubble part of the skirt, I cut a really long rectangle, and I made sure that the rectangle was 6 inches longer than the bubble lining, so that way it would make that bubble effect when I sewed the two pieces together. Back to the lining pieces, I sewed the front and back together on one side seam, and repeated this step with the outer fabric. Then I did a gathering stitch along the top and bottom edge of the outer fabric. I gathered it by hand and then I pinned it to the lining fabric. First I sewed the bottom edges together, right sides together. And then I turned it right side out and pinned the top edges together so that the wrong sides were together, and did a basting stitch along that top edge. Then I sewed the skirt to the bodice. Guys, the dress is made, it's on the mannequin. All I have left to do now is to finish sewing the zip in the side and hand stitching the lining in, but you guys have seen that a million times, so I'm not going to bore you with that. Instead, how about I just show you what this dress looks like? So I for one am absolutely shocked that I still fit this, because this is my high school jacket, but it doesn't do up, but whatever, I got it on. I didn't think I'd get my arms through it. So, let's take a photo. I don't even know if I have the upper body strength to do this anymore. Sadly, there's no cool drawings here today, but this is the spot that I took the rest of the photos. Don't come in my cave! This is where I would kick leaves if there were any, so put this bad boy here. Sadly, there's no longer a waterfall here, but we'll do our best. Sadly, I'm not at Disney World, but I will be there later on in the year. But until then, this is what we're making do with. Welcome to London Courtyard, I guess. And there you have it. That is how I recreated my favourite dress from High School Musical. Do, 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 do. I'm really happy with how it came out. It's honestly just how I remembered it, and I can see myself wearing this one to death as well. From what I remember, there's only some slight differences between this one and my old one. The first is the polka dot fabric. I remember my old dress was a much more sturdier, thicker cotton fabric, and the polka dots were printed on, which was another issue when it came to wearing it as much as I did, because the polka dots did actually start to rub off and fade. And this fabric, as you know, is a rayon, and the polka dots are actually woven into the fabric, so I shouldn't have that same problem again. The second difference is I put the zipper on the wrong side. It doesn't matter that much. It just feels weird when I go to put it on. I'm like, oh, I should be zipping up on this side, but there's no zip there. Other than that, pretty good replica. If you like this video, please let me know down below. I would really love to make this a series, because I have another black dress from my high school days which I'm also dying to remake, so if you want to see it, please let me know. I am so keen to give that one a remake too. If you really liked it, maybe even consider subscribing. I do a lot of sewing, crafting and fun related content here on this channel, and I usually try and upload every weekend or so. With all that being said, I'll see you guys next week. Goodbye!